Okay, guys, I am going to get started answering questions. So if you want to grab a seat or if you want to keep chatting, you're welcome to go out into the hallway. Okay, so I may defer some questions to the experts on our team as they come up, but I'll do my best to get through them as quickly as possible. There's quite a few questions, so it's going to be a little bit. So the current sidewalk on the north side of 45th are unsafe and unpleasant given the current 45 to 50 mile an hour traffic load on West 45th. Will the sidewalk on West 45th be increased in width? So the sidewalk on West 45th is not going to be increased in width, at least not by us. It's included in our multimodal study as an item. But what we are doing is we're locating a sidewalk internal to the site. It'll go through the Greenbelt area, ultimately connect over to the Shoal Creek Bridge. So on the south side, we're improving 45th sidewalk connectivity there. We're also willing to make improvements to the sidewalk on the west side of 45th. And so as we get into the details of site planning and the construction of that intersection, we're willing to make those improvements. Okay. You indicate bike lanes on only one side of the street. How do you expect cyclists in a two-way bike lane to navigate across lanes carrying 26,000 cars a day in order to turn? So we actually have so we've got numerous bike trails throughout the project, anywhere from 8-foot wide on our smaller streets internally to 12-foot wide paths that run throughout the project, including through the park, and then we'll ultimately connect down into the Ridgelea subdivision for ultimate connection to the Shoal Creek Trail. The bike lanes on Bull Creek, which I think is where this question is headed, we have a southbound bike lane on the road, and then we have a 12-foot wide shared use path that's actually off the roadway that's going to be internal to the site, and it'll be located in a nicely landscaped, it's going to be the front entry of the project. It'll be a gorgeous area for the bike trail to pass through. Before you get to the park on... You understand what she's saying? So, bicycle connectivity there. Talk about this queue going north.
Yes, if I understand the question correctly, so south of the project, there are existing bike lanes on Bull Creek Road, which will connect to the improvements in Bull Creek Road in front of the project. In the southbound direction on Bull Creek Road, there will be a protected bike lane. In the northbound direction, there will be a two-way shared use path available for northbound traffic. When you reach the intersection of 45th and Bull Creek Road, there will be a protected bike crossing, and then the intersection is aligned in such a way as to allow that northbound bike lane to continue through the intersection to the north, so that when bike lanes are added from 45th Street to Hancock, that will be able to accommodate those bike lanes there as well. So we have accounted for bike lane connectivity north-south from Hancock down to 38th Street. The city has not yet determined whether north and south of our project long-term they want to do one-way bike lanes on each side of the street or two-lane bike lanes on one side of the street. But our project will be successful into tying into either of those systems. We've designed it to be adaptable to both a two-way cycle track system north and south of the project or a one-way bike system on either side of the road. And it will today tie into the existing facilities that are there. So there will be no short-term degradation in bike service and potential for a long-term improvement.
Are you planning on purchasing all of the West 45th Street houses on the south and north sides from Bull Creek to Shoal Creek Bridge? No, we do not have any plans to purchase any additional houses on 45th. How do you expect tractor-trailer trucks serving the proposed 35,000 square foot grocer and retail to access the site? So the turning radiuses associated with those trucks are taken into account in the radiuses or radii that are used within the site and within the site planning. And If you have additional concern relating to that, you're welcome to talk with Brian afterwards. Those things are generally things that are dealt with at a site plan stage, which is further down the road. Given how much discussion and how much planning we've already put into the roadway system going into the project, we've already done a lot of that design work, and so we know that it works. Do you plan on the road through the West 45th Street house being an access exit for delivery trucks? So we, and I'll let Brian speak to this a little more. So they will be capable of driving through that access point. It's not something that we plan on taking place. In fact, when you look at that access point relative to our overall study of traffic, we don't need that access point for traffic to work and to work really well. The city has requested us to provide that access point because they're adhering to their policy standards of compact and connected communities, which I think is appropriate. And as you add more intersections and more intersections that function well, you get a reduced likelihood of cut-through traffic. If intersections are performing well, you get less congestion because people go through the path of least resistance, which is a well-performing intersection. It's when intersections start performing poorly that you start getting congestion. And so if you add more intersections, they tend to perform better, and it's generally a good idea from a planning and policy perspective. What is the maximum estimated wait time? How many times during a weekday will 75% or more of the max wait time occur? How many minutes each weekday will the wait time be at 75% or more of the maximum? Brian? Okay, so I'll read the question again, and so there are certain metrics that you deal with in traffic study, and there are certain metrics that you don't. I would suspect that this would require some additional research, but I'm going to let Brian take a crack at it. What is the maximum estimated wait time? One question. How many wait times during a weekday will 75% or more of the max wait time occur? So how often does the wait time occur? How often does the max wait time occur? And so let me just answer that one real fast. So there's two maximum wait times in a day. There's an AM maximum wait and there's a PM maximum wait. We call them the AM and the PM peak. The AM and PM peak represent the key points in time that get studied to understand the maximum congestion that'll take place throughout the day. I'm going to let him speak to the max wait time there. The average wait time is 35 seconds, which is the number that you guys saw on the graphic. And then the last part of the question is how many minutes each weekday will the wait time be at 75% or more of the maximum? So again, it's basically how long is it? The way traffic is studied is there's a 1 hour time frame that represents the maximum. So that's the AM peak and the PM peak, and that occurs twice a day. So really, I think the overarching question here is, what's the max wait time?
I would say I can't answer that because intersections are studied using, it's called the Highway Capacity Manual, and it's the mechanism for studying the performance of intersections. That study goes into average wait time for specific lane movements, so it'll tell you average wait time for your northbound left turn movement or your northbound right turn movement or your through movement, but it doesn't provide a method to go into some statistical analysis of minimum and maximum wait times. It gives an average wait time, and that's it. So I'm sure there's some way to run some sort of simulation or estimation and do some sort of statistical breakdown to try to determine a 75% statistical wait time, but I just have never heard of that and couldn't tell you how to go about doing that. Well, so the definition of the peak hour, it's a peak hour, 1 hour it's studied, and really it's actually there's this thing called the peak hour factor, and it looks at the most intense 15 minutes within that hour to study that 15 minutes of most intense traffic within the hour. And then it assigns a wait time at that most intense 15 minutes, but it doesn't necessarily expand out across a 3 hour period.
Okay, the next question is, why aren't you including a bus lane on Bull Creek Road? So we've met with Cap Metro several times to talk about planning for the project, planning specifically for buses for the project. We've relocated a couple of the bus stops, and just in candor, the bus line, the 19 bus line that runs in front of the site, doesn't get a lot of use. It was on the brink of being eliminated before our project was announced. So the project is going to facilitate a lot of additional use on that 19 line, which is otherwise not very well utilized. And so our plan is to work in earnest with Cap Metro to identify the best way for us to do that. Why aren't we putting bike lanes in? The answer is because they don't, or bus lanes in. It's because they don't want that. They don't want. So we offered some turnouts, and there's a lot of problems with buses turning in and out of traffic and moving in and out of traffic. And so they've gone to a policy of not requesting that and not preferring that, which makes some sense when you talk through all of the logistical challenges associated with moving a large bus in and out of traffic. And so that's why we're not offering bus lanes, is because they don't want the bus lanes. Cap Metro. Yep. Okay, traffic. 45th Street traffic lanes are very thin. How do you get spare for left turn lanes? So I'll let Brian speak to details on this. And a picture is worth 1,000 words. So maybe if we can get the proposed 45th intersection pulled up. But what happens is at the intersection of 45th, and for Brian, what's the extension of the turn lanes back? It's about 150 feet. I think it's 60 feet on one side. So on the east side of 45th, there's about 190 foot of turn lane that gets added to facilitate and accommodate the traffic that's going to stack in that turn lane. And on the west side of the intersection, it's about 60 feet. Okay, 60 feet of turn lane. Thank you, sir. That gets added to that portion of the intersection. And so what happens is the cross section of pavement. The cross section of pavement that is right here and right here gets expanded. And so that grows within the right-of-way. Now, the right-of-way is a section that generally has about 10 feet beyond the drive surface. So it's basically 10-foot extent. And that's put there for planning purposes for future expansion. And so what we're doing is we're now expanding into that area to accommodate those turn lanes. And as Brian mentioned earlier, these two turn lanes right here are critical to the performance of that intersection, because what it does is it eliminates that split phase timing that he was talking about. And that split phase timing is what kills the performance of intersections, because you're literally, and I would encourage you as you drive up to an intersection, specifically even this intersection, try and catch the light instead of speeding through it. And sit there and watch how it performs, because as you become more in tune with this sort of study of traffic, it's really interesting to watch it perform. And you'll find that you're sitting there watching other people drive by when, if it was a little wider, you could be going at the same time that they're going. And so that additional green time that Brian was talking about is what dramatically improves the performance of the intersection. But the short answer is it's expansion of the width within the right-of-way that already exists there. Yeah, the east-west part. Yeah, it's in the existing right-of-way. It's right of way, so the pavement will grow within the existing right of way that's there. Okay. No, the sidewalk on the north side stays. So it widens within that space. And so there's some additional on the north side and some additional on the south side. Brian, what are the exact dimensions? Yeah. That answer your question? Mhm. It so it expands within the existing right of way. So well, right, and let me add a little bit to that. So there's 10 foot there. So I think we're moving it like 7 feet or something like that. Is that about right? Yep, 7 foot on the south side. The south side, it doesn't get too close to the houses. On the north side, it gets closer to the house because the house isn't really situated within its setback. And so we've talked with that homeowner in particular, and we're very willing to work with her to try and accommodate any negative impact that might be had because of the road expansion there. There aren't any power lines that we have to move there. Yeah, I think there are some poles on the south side that are part of the sort of the traffic functionality there. Let me try and get through the questions here. If you have some questions, please feel free to fill out the card. What's the expansion on the north side? It's 3 on the north. Yeah. Okay. How will you prevent westbound traffic on 45th from entering the Grove at the house you purchased? How will you prevent westbound traffic? We're not going to prevent westbound traffic from entering. I'm sorry. Yes. So and a picture's worth 1,000 words on that one too, Caitlin. There's a little, we call it affectionately the pork chop in the middle of the road that will physically prevent people from entering into that unless they're entering right turn, right in, right out. And so when she gets that image up, there it is. This is the pork chop right here. And you can see people can turn in here and they can exit here, but going westbound, they wouldn't be able to get in. This will be a physical impediment to them making that turn in. Okay. How will you sorry, I read that one already. That one's blank. I'm going to go through the questions. If you want to ask one, if you wouldn't mind filling out a card. Are any plans in place to address speeding all along Jackson or just by the Grove entrance? So along Bull Creek Road, we're going to have a pretty substantial impact on speeds there with what we're doing to the roadway and how we're configuring it. We're putting in some pedestrian refuges, some that are going to operate in conjunction with those pedestrian hybrid beacons, which are basically the crossings that you push the button and they start flashing. The pedestrian refuges that we're putting in, the narrowing effect of the lane and the landscaping and everything else that we're putting in there has a calming effect on speeds and will have a calming effect on speeds on Bull Creek Road. On Jackson Road, we're not planning on making those improvements. We're not planning on making any improvements along Jackson. We are planning on making some improvements at the intersection of Jackson and 35th. There's some signal timing changes that take place there. There's some restriping that takes place there on the intersection, which are the primary improvements that you'll see along Jackson, in addition to the light that we'll be installing at Jackson and Bull Creek Road, which will improve functionality and performance there. What makes you think that cars won't come via 35th Street? What are your plans for 35th and Bull Creek Road in Jefferson? Okay. So I'm going to let Brian speak to this a little bit, and he can talk to you about the sort of the technical aspects of how that's determined.
Yeah, I think I need to explain that trip distribution a little bit more. I think I heard somebody maybe yelling something from the audience that they didn't necessarily believe what I was saying. So let me just, maybe not that politely. So it's page 11 of our traffic study. It's table 4. It's called trip distribution. And this trip distribution was determined by getting traffic pattern counts in the neighborhood and then meeting with city staff to coming up with this distribution. And let me read it for you real quick. It's gonna be numbers, a lot of directions, but y'all need the details. Okay, so it says, and this is the direction that vehicles will be coming and going from. It says Mopac 45th Street to the north, 20%. Mopac to the south, 21%. Mopac 35th to the south, 12%. Bull Creek to the north, 4%. Shoal Creek north, so that'd be somebody that would be, going down 45th Street and then heading north on Shoal Creek, 4%. 45th Street east, 17%. 35th Street west, 7%. Jefferson to the south, 5%. Bull Creek south, 10%. So, as I mentioned earlier, you have all these trips from the site. They leave the site via the road network with those trip distributions. That's what's detailed in our traffic study, intersection by intersection, driveway by driveway, how many vehicles are going to be going through each specific segment. And this trip distribution is what I used to come up with those numbers earlier. I hope that maybe provides some clarity.
I also had a question about what are your plans for 35th and Bull Creek?
Okay. Bull Creek Road.
Or 35th and Jefferson, where Bull Creek Road comes in, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, at 35th and Bull Creek and then Jefferson and Bull Creek, we don't have any improvements proposed at those locations besides some optimizing of signal timing. Those intersections, I think, let me look and tell you the exact number here.
So while he's looking that up, we've got another one, which is how will large delivery trucks get in and get out of the site? So that's a repeat.
So there's about with the increase in traffic, there's about a 3-second additional delay at those intersections because they grow about 3 seconds. And again, any specific intersection, any analysis that you're interested in, it's all located in our traffic study.
Okay, so the delivery trucks will use the same primary route that most people use to get in and out of the community. I'm sorry? It is wide enough, yes. I'm sorry? I would imagine most of the delivery trucks will probably come from Mopac. Okay, other than Councilmember Gallo, did you request invite city staff from transportation and planning to attend, present, and or answer questions? If not, why? So we have actually mentioned this meeting to several senior staff members and invited them to come. They politely declined. I think that they have more than, from what I understand, made themselves available to the neighborhood as a resource to provide information. And the reason that I know that is because I know that they've had numerous meetings with various constituents within the neighborhood. And so I think that they have and will continue to be willing to speak with and answer any questions that you may have.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Howard. I'm going to answer this question because it's kind of directed towards me. The question is, why was transportation staff not part of the 323 meeting Jeff Howard had with Austin Development Services and Planning Departments? And the answer to that is transportation review staff was there. Brian Golden is transportation reviewer, he was there. Eric Bollick is a transportation engineer and reviewer, he was there. Andy Linseisen, he was there. The meeting was called by the city of Austin, not by us. They wanted to review their review comments. We met with them. There was probably half a dozen staff members there. So, transportation review staff was there.
Jeff, what Jeff didn't say is that he's a little offended by the insinuation in the comment. I think the insinuation is that there's somehow been some sort of inappropriate behavior that has taken place, which has been an accusation that's been made that is totally and completely incorrect. We've been working on the TIA with transportation staff in earnest, doing everything you can imagine under the sun to accommodate their need for more information so that they can understand the performance of the intersection for the last 12 months. It's not unreasonable for 1 second to think that after 12 months of review of a 400-plus page TIA that they've now come to the conclusion that it does in fact work. We've made substantial things happen in order to get to that point, and in order to get to the point where they can understand the detail and the level of detail that they've put into that review. That review has been unprecedented. They've done, there's probably 150 years worth of experience on our engineering and entitlement team, and we've never seen the level of effort and thoroughness in review of a TIA as we saw on this project. So that's another part of the answer there. What makes you think trips coming from 35th Street north on Bull Creek will be a tiny minority? That's the trip distribution that Brian just talked about when he talked about the distribution that's used in the TIA. What road improvements will be made to accommodate the 15,000 plus minus vehicles driving through two-lane streets like Jackson Boulevard from 35th, Bull Creek Road north of 45th, Highland Terrace, Mopac, 45th, Shippero, Jefferson, Bull Creek, Finley. So it's a trip distribution question, and so we talked about how we got to the trip distribution, but it's also worth mentioning that the first part of his presentation was geared towards addressing that question. The primary trips enter and exit off of about, it's less than probably 2,000 feet of Bull Creek Road, and that's approximately how much of Bull Creek Road that those trips will use. So the other response I would make to the question is you get traffic and cars using the small streets that are mentioned in this question when you have low performing intersections. So when intersections perform poorly, the traffic squeezes out into the neighborhood to try and find a way. I think Google just paid, however many billions of dollars to buy a company called Waze. And this application on your phone tells you how to squish through traffic more efficiently, and oftentimes directs you to cut through neighborhoods so that you can more efficiently move through a neighborhood when there's high congestion and high traffic. If you eliminate the congestion at the intersections, then you eliminate the cut-through traffic. Okay, did we analyze traffic north of 45th on Bull Creek Road? Yes, we did. The traffic north of 45th on Bull Creek Road was referred to in Brian's presentation, and I think it's like 800 trips? 850 trips. Those 850 trips are the neighborhood that lives up there, and they're generated by the neighborhood driving through the intersection probably to get to our site. This gentleman had actually asked me at the outset of the presentation to call on him, and he requested the same in a card, so I just want to take the opportunity to let him ask his question. Thank you. So, so what's evident for me about the question is that there's this fear over traffic, and I appreciate that, and I'm sympathetic to that fear. Traffic's bad in Austin, and we all don't want it to get any worse. Let me speak to the question, and I'll ask Brian to speak to the question. So the way that it's called a scope, the way a scope is determined is the city determines the scope that the TIA is going to study. And so what happened in our case is about 12 months ago, we knew that the TIA was going to be a critical component to the project. And so we went to the city and we asked them, as you normally do, we said, okay, what is our scope going to be for this particular project? And in the ordinary course of business, this was before there was a lot of public scrutiny, in the ordinary course of business, they issued us a scope of work, a scope for the TIA, and it defines the study area that you're going to use in your TIA. And so the city did that, and then as things kind of progressed, there was more scrutiny that was placed on the neighborhood, by the neighborhoods, on the city staff, and on the project overall. And because of that, the city did something unprecedented. They don't normally do this because of the dollars and the hours and the effort that goes into creating a TIA, which we did based on the original scope. The city changed the scope of the TIA, and they expanded the scope of the TIA, and they made it bigger than the original scope. We started over on the TIA, and we had to go and spend the additional dollars, time, effort, and energy about, I don't know, call it 6 months into the process. They expanded the scope of it. We went along with it. We disagreed with that from a fundamental approach and process perspective. That's not what the city's supposed to do, but we went along with it to prove what we knew was the case, that the traffic worked, and that it created a better performance situation than will exist if nothing is done out there. And so we then used the new scope, which was provided by the city, with the ridiculously low internal capture, bypass, and bicycle and pedestrian reductions that they had allocated to us. And we proved that it still works. And it's a tough concept to get your head around when there's all of the sort of the fear and concern with the reality of what we deal with on a regular basis, which is lots of traffic in Austin. And the reality is we're going to make the situation better even after we add our traffic to the intersection. Appreciate the question, and I hope I answered it well. Brian or Robert, how many of the vehicles are bicycles or not cars? How have you considered the change in vehicle miles traveled? That's an interesting question. I'm going to let Robert answer the second part, and I'll ask it the first part again for you, Brian. How many of the vehicles are bicycles, not cars? And I think I'm equipped to answer that. So basically, in the TIA, we're getting very little credit for bicycles or pedestrian traffic into the project. The average across the city is a 5%. So when the city scopes a TIA, like we just talked about, the city says on average for suburban developments and different developments that have no mixed use component, that they're going to give 5%. And in our case, they gave 1.5%. And so they're dramatically underestimating the number of bicycle and pedestrian trips that will be associated with the project. Have you considered the change in vehicle miles traveled? We haven't, but
I don't know who asked that question.
maybe we can get a clarification on the change in vehicle miles traveled. I'm thinking that it's associated with maybe capture associated with bicycles and pedestrians. Is the person here that asked the question? Okay. So the streets are inadequate for the proposed development. What will you do to address scale? and to scale the development appropriately. And the answer there, I think, has largely been addressed by the presentation. That we're expanding the streets, and in some cases, in the case of Bull Creek, we're dramatically expanding the streets and making them larger to handle the traffic. Okay, there's a redundant question on where does the space for all of the extra turn lanes come from? We've answered that. How many car lengths long are these new lanes? A 3-car long turn lane seems to add little benefit. Agreed. What's the western side of the intersection? How many stacking?
60 feet for 3 vehicles in the eastbound direction.
Yeah.
There's very little traffic that's turning left on Bull Creek.
Yeah, so the traffic at that intersection that turns left and goes north on Bull Creek Road is less than 1% of the total.
It's more than that, but it's like.
What is it? What's the percentage?
I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've looked at it. Everybody, it's like maybe 2%, 2.5%.
Okay, so 2.5% of the total traffic through that intersection turns left and goes north on Bull Creek Road. And so there's just no need for stacking on that side of things, which is why we can keep the turn bay short there. On the other side, there is need for stacking. So what's the stacking there?
I think about 180,
180, 190
190 feet.
feet. It's substantial. Do we know how many cars that accommodates?
You assume 20 feet a car.
20 feet. Okay, about 10 cars of stacking on the other side, which is where more stacking will occur. I applaud your concern with traffic. We can no longer expect our road usage to look like 1960. How can our citizens be encouraged to share and embrace new neighbors? It's a great question. I love the question. So the reality is, and I don't know what the stat is today, but I think I saw one the other day that 159 people are moving to Austin, Texas every day or something like that. And okay, 5-county area. And so there's bottom line is there's lots of people moving to Austin, Texas on a daily basis. And we're not causing them to move here by building the Grove. We are providing them with housing. We're providing them with somewhere to go and have a nice meal at a great restaurant. We're providing them, some of them, with a place to work. And so we certainly want to do that. You can get involved by speaking to your council members. You can get involved by participating in the neighborhood discussions that take place. You can get involved through Friends of the Grove, which is a great organization that supports the project and has worked with us collaboratively to improve various elements of the project. A lot of the residential changes that you saw in the presentation today come out of a residential design charrette that we held with the Friends of the Grove folks and with the broader community being invited as well. And I think that the impact is phenomenal, and it certainly has increased the diversity of housing types in the project, which is going to be great for welcoming new neighbors to Austin. Okay, so there's the first part of the question deals with overloading traffic on Bull Creek. The second part of the question asks, would you be willing to give up Grove land to add 2 new lanes to Bull Creek Drive? And the answer is that we're doing that. We are providing, in addition to the intersection improvements that we're making there, we're providing the improvements along Bull Creek Road, and we're also expanding Bull Creek Road onto our property and dedicating the right-of-way associated with that expansion to make it bigger and more functional. So there's a redundant question on traffic on Bull Creek. And then the next part of the question is, has city traffic engineering staff agreed with the traffic plan? And the answer to that is that they have almost agreed to the traffic plan, and we believe that they will formally agree within the next few days. And that's after a longer than a year-long review of the TIA and all of the scrutiny that they've poured over it. Why are you not willing to release the simulation? We're going to post a simulation on our website, so you can take a look at it. And I alluded to why we were not interested in releasing it, and that was because of the likelihood of abuse of the simulation. What were the results from the traffic studies to 45th Street other than BCRC or Bull Creek Road, Mopac, Perry Lane, 38th, and other nearby roads? What were the results from traffic studies to 45th Street? I'm not sure I understand the question. If the person here that's asking it, feel free to elaborate. For vehicle trip reduction, pedestrian doesn't the TIA already have up to 34% reduction for pass-by trips? No. What's that? What is the pass-by? Is it?
I can tell you that. I think there's a couple uses that use the 34% pass-by reduction, and that pass-by reduction is below what's typical, but kind of understandable because at that point in time of our TIA, it was only driveways off Bull Creek Road, and so the pass-by percentage in our traffic study is a little less than normal on a few of the uses. Um, I'm not sure if that answers the question, but yeah, there is some pass-by reductions in our traffic study, which is a typical reduction. That's somebody that's already driving down the road and pulls in to use a use. So, for example, a residential use isn't going to get a pass-by reduction because nobody's accidentally driving by their home. Hopefully not. Or sometimes people are driving by maybe the dry cleaners or the bank or something like that. One of those uses, they pull in, get back on the road. It's not an extra trip on the road. It's called a pass-by trip.
Thank you, Brian. Will retail and office space be built and operational before residential units are built? And people can actually work there. No, the first stuff to come online in the Grove is going to be the residential units, and then the office and retail will come online after that. Mass transit options, locations, bus, taxi, rail, UT shuttles. So we are improving the bus transit associated with the site. There's a couple images in the presentation that address that. We're going to add a bus stop, and then we're also working, and it's a little premature at this point, but we're also working with Cap Metro on schedule timing, which has a big impact on ridership. If you get the schedule timing right and you make it useful for people, then they're more likely to actually use the buses. How will the semis and large delivery trucks get into the Grove? Will you release the TIA synchro file so that an independent traffic engineer can review it? The answer is we're putting the synchro file is what can be used to produce the pictures of traffic flowing around the site. We're going to post those on the website so that people can watch the videos and review there. How do you expect the residents on the south side of 45th, west of Bull Creek, and on the street north of West 45th to safely exit their homes and streets with constant traffic generated by the development and the intersecting street that you are building through the house on West 45th? And so the answer is that there will continue to be gaps in traffic that take place along that road. So the way that they get in and out of their houses right now is how they're going to continue to get in and out of their houses. Anyone care to elaborate on that? Capping? Yeah, and one of the things that we've looked at is we've looked at potentially timing that more appropriately. So as we set up the intersection at 45th and Bull Creek, making sure that there's sufficient gapping there so that you can actually get in and out of the driveways. Would Milestone be willing to have an independent third-party review of the traffic study inputs, analysis, and results? The traffic impact analysis is publicly available, so anyone's feel free to look at it at any time. Yeah, the city is also an independent third party that spent a year reviewing the traffic study. There's an existing problem with drainage at 45th and Bull Creek Road. You address that?
I haven't personally seen this, but I noticed when I was looking at some topography of that area, I assume somebody's talking about the southwest corner of the intersection. Yeah, it looks like it's really flat right there, and no slope for the water to drain off. And when we reconstruct that intersection right there and re-pour the curb returns, we're going to try to make sure we create some relief so the water will drain off that area, not pond. I assume that's what the question was.
There are a few park questions here that I will try to tackle. Why is the 600 congregate care and 160 or 180 affordable housing units not included in the parkland area determination? The answer is a little bit different for each of them. The reason the affordable housing units are not included is essentially a policy decision by the city to try to help incentivize affordable housing and not add additional costs to that use. The congregate care is not included because the congregate care is not a residential use. It's considered a civic use, and there are a lot of reasons for that, but it's essentially the impact on a whole host of infrastructure elements, including parkland, of that use is so much smaller because the people utilizing that use spend so much more time, so much larger percentage of their time staying on their site and not exiting the site. And there's an identical question here. And then the next one, Milestone has agreed to the minimum amount of parkland required by code, 13 acres. Why not commit to more parkland? There's a couple of elements to that question. One is that the unit cap on the site has been reduced, and the parkland commitment that we've made is about an acre and a half in excess of the minimum code requirement for parkland. So we are not at the minimum parkland requirement. We are also exceeding minimum requirements by fully improving the parkland and long-term maintenance of the parkland, which are really substantial commitments by the project that save the city and its taxpayers a ton of money and ensure that the parks are maintained to a level of quality that frankly the city can't achieve when they maintain parkland. And it's also worth noting that our parkland dedication is based on the maximum possible entitlement of residential units on the site. So the only reason, if we're an acre and a half over now, we will be more than an acre and a half over unless we build every single unit that's entitled on the site, which is unlikely. What percentage of the parkland in the signature park, not pocket parks, is in excess of the floodplain? And there's a couple of questions along these lines. The floodplain is about 3.5 acres of the signature park. That's the 100-year floodplain. Composes about 3.5 acres of the signature park. Of the minimum 13 acres of the signature park, about 6 acres of that is below 10% slope. So there's about 10 acres of the park that's generally level. There's also some additional flex space that we'll be providing to the site. Some of that will likely occur in the signature park and will be additional generally level land within the signature park. So I've got 3 or 4 questions that basically ask the same question. And then, how much will the city pay towards the pedestrian bridge, and how much will the city have to pay? I can let Garrett answer this more decisively, but the answer is none. How much will the city pay towards the pedestrian bridge? I mean, the answer is none. The project is fully funding the pedestrian bridge.
Yeah, the city's responsibility on the pedestrian bridge, and this is something that they've stepped up and owned, and I think it's to their credit and largely to Councilmember Gallo's credit. For stepping up and committing to go and negotiate the easement with the state. So from one governmental agency to another, it's a whole lot easier and a whole lot more efficient for them to try and go negotiate that deal than for us to come in and ask the state of Texas to give us an easement. And so they stepped up when we sort of put together the strategy for actually going out and executing on the bridge and making it happen and bringing it to fruition. We stepped up to write the check to make that part of things happen, and the city stepped up to go and effectuate the easement because they're in the best position to go do that.
And there's an additional question here along the same lines, but it says, how much money is Milestone willing to pay for the bridge across the creek? So what we've agreed to with the city is that we will provide a detailed engineered cost estimate to the city as part of the zoning agreement, and then the developer will post fiscal on the full amount of that bridge. So that money will basically be held by the city until either the bridge is constructed, or if for some reason the bridge cannot be constructed due to external factors, then that money would be held by the city for other pedestrian and bicycle improvements in the area.
So just to follow up is, I'm very familiar with the other pedestrian bridge in Shoal Creek, and it's come with some cost. This is a considerable larger span. So, I mean, are you willing to pay $3 to $5 million? Because I think based on what I've seen, that's what it's gonna cost. Are you guys willing to put that forward?
No, the bridge is not going to cost $3 to $5 million either, though. So if you use an efficient alignment and you cross it where we believe it's most appropriate to be crossed, then the cost is going to be substantially less than that. And so the cost we believe, based on our preliminary cost estimates, is something that we're absolutely willing to provide. And there's no doubt in my mind that an inefficient approach to locating and positioning that bridge could turn it into a $3 million bridge. But an efficient, reasonable, rational approach to locating the bridge is going to be cost effective for us to be able to contribute. Go ahead.
The 50-foot northern greenbelt locates a trail immediately next to the back walls of your planned housing and the existing neighbors' yards. Why do you not honor the neighbor's request for a trail in the middle of at least a 100-foot greenbelt? So the first part of that question, if you could maybe flip to the rendering of the greenbelt really quickly, those are not back walls of the homes. The intent is to turn those homes to actually face and address the greenbelt. They'll have porches on the greenbelt. We want to activate that greenbelt. We want those homes to engage with the greenbelt. And so the goal is for those homes to actually face the greenbelt and to activate and engage on that space. The reason that a greater greenbelt is not provided in that area is that 50 feet is incredibly adequate for a comfortable greenbelt, and it's also a doubling of compatibility standards for based on the city of Austin. So it's a very generous, comfortable compatibility standard for those existing homes, we feel, and we think it's a substantial benefit on that edge. Is there a plan for an off-leash dog area park? If not, why not? If yes, how big? The land has been heavily used by neighbors for a dog park for years, and it would be a mistake not to include one in future plans. There's not currently a plan for an off-leash dog park in the park. The reason for that is that there are a lot of different uses we want to accommodate in that park. I think that there's going to be a lot of space within that park that is a great place to go with your dogs. It's going to be a great park for dogs, but it's not going to be an off-leash dog park anymore. It's going to be a great park for people as well. Right now, today, it works very well as an off-leash dog park because there are, frankly, very, very few people using it on an average day. Our vision is for that park to get a ton more use, to get more use from the neighborhood because we're improving access to the park, to get more use from the new residents of the Grove as well. And so I think it'll be a wonderful park for dogs, a wonderful park for people. Increasing bus lines in the neighborhood we've already talked about. And where is parking for cars for retail businesses? The answer to that question is that basically everything on the site is going to be parked on site. There are structured parking garages in the plan. You can see 4 structured parking garages in the new plan here. All of the streets have on-street parking along the streets. There's a lot of parking included there as well. There's a small amount of surface parking associated with the project, but very little. And then all of the for sale residential will be self-parked as well. Absolutely, yes. There will be sufficient parking for employees, customers, et cetera. That's correct.
Yeah, so the gray boxes are parking garages. There'll be on-street parking located throughout the project on both the residential and the commercial streets. The other thing that's worth mentioning is there's a lot of innovative technology-based stuff that's taking place that makes parking more usable and more effective, both in the garage and on street. we're fully committed to pulling those technology benefits into the project to make the parking garages function well, the little readouts that tell you how many spaces are available, that kind of thing. And then also we've contemplated potentially metering parking in the sort of the retail area, not for a financial gain, but because it helps with turnover of those spaces, and that can be productive as well from a sort of get in, get out, and efficiency perspective. Okay, so we're going to shift gears to affordable housing. How much affordable housing will there be, and for whom? And then the next one is how much of the pedestrian bicycle bridge will be funded. So we've dealt with the funding question. We're going to base that on a detailed cost estimate from the engineers for a reasonably efficient crossing of Shoal Creek. On the affordable housing, how much will there be and for whom? Our proposal for affordable housing is to have 180 units. About 104 of those units are going to be rental units, and about 76 of those units are going to be for-sale units. They range in terms of the median family income that they service, but our affordable housing program has been largely applauded by advocates within the affordable housing community and the city. So it's a great program, and we're excited to be able to bring it. Most developers pay a fee. They don't do it on site. The cost of doing it on site is significantly greater than the fee, and we are committed to doing it on site within the project, locating it around the project, which has been another source of concern or criticism, is that we're congregating it all in one area. It'll be located throughout the project. So we're very excited about the affordable housing proposal that we've laid out for the city. Yes. In fact, for the better or the worse, Miller's kind of a example for us to watch out for. And we've definitely taken note and are making sure that we prepare our program so that it doesn't experience some of the same pitfalls. So yes, on the long term, and there's a couple different ways that we're effectuating the long term, but deed restrictions, community land trust, those types of things will be used to preserve the long-term affordability. And I hope I answered your question. There's one other thing I was going to mention to you, but what are we doing to assure that the affordable housing stays affordable after it's sold? We got that. Newspaper articles have described affordable housing at the Grove for teachers, some of the units dedicated to them. Is that true? What details can you provide? So yes, it's true. We've earmarked 19 of the for sale affordable housing units to be for teachers. And so what will happen is those will go into a program where they get allocated among the teachers. It'll probably be a lottery program. And we have a affordable housing consultant that's part of our team. Well, we have many affordable housing consultants that are now part of our team. It took a lot of work and energy to get to the point where we had a great affordable housing program that we could bring to fruition, and those team members have been instrumental in making that happen. One of those will continue on with the project, and she will administer the affordable housing programs. When her business changes or goes away or whatever happens over the next, call it 100 years, there is a mechanism provided to ensure that that program continues, and part of that mechanism ultimately is the city and the city's administration of the program. AISD sources have indicated that they have no experience with and no intention of managing housing for teachers. Please explain how you expect this program to work. So I just elaborated on that a little bit. But it'll basically go into a long-term program. The allocation, we're happy to make the allocation. We're, if AISD wants to make sure that the allocation takes place in a fair and equitable sort of way. There are details that have yet to be worked out to determine how that works, but it's probably going to be through a lottery system. The neighborhoods surrounding the Grove have long advocated affordable housing for families. Why are there only 19 affordable houses being built? There are not 19 affordable houses being built. Please give the numbers of each of the following affordable housing categories that will be built and their price ranges. And then there's 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom broken out. And then there's 3 bedroom houses on there. I can answer the bottom one, which is 3 bedroom houses. There's not going to be any 3 bedroom houses. There will be 3 bedroom apartments and condos that will be available. We made a commitment in the program that we proposed to the city of Austin to make some of the units family friendly, which basically means 3 bedrooms. And so a portion of the units will be the family friendly units. And then the 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom, we haven't put a breakdown in place yet at this point. We don't have a breakdown, but we've committed to the unit numbers in the proposal that we've made to the city. And then we've also made the commitment to make some of those units family-friendly units. What are the price points and price ranges of housing? So the price points and price ranges of housing, they'll range from about $160,000 to about $1.2 million. The $1.2 million are the homes that we've located against the Ridgeley neighborhood, which provide a compatibility buffer and setback. We committed to doing those early on. Not only are we providing those homes there, but we're providing substantially more, almost double the city required setback against the existing neighborhood for those homes as well. Those will be the most expensive homes. They're kind of more traditional lot sizes. Yeah, on that side. And then the rest of the housing, and Robert went through kind of a detailed summary of all the rest of the housing types. The key thing, I guess, to draw out for y'all between this master plan and the prior master plan is that the average house price in the community dropped dramatically. And so we increased the number of smaller, more affordable units within the project. We did that by adding some condo units that'll be in condo buildings. And we also did that by adding a higher number of smaller townhome units that'll be located within the project as well as some, and that range kind of continues all the way up through the curve. We now have 3 types of detached single-family houses that will serve a much broader price band than the single-family houses that we had in the original presentation. This is a redundant question. How many $1 million homes will be built, and what's the size of the lots that they'll be built on? It's a 50-foot lot, and it's 20 or 21 houses. Okay, that was affordable housing.
Looks like I'm up again. If Jefferson and Kirby Lane area has 375,000 square feet of retail office space in Central Market Triangle, West 35th Street, medical offices, et cetera, why do you believe that 383,000 more square feet of retail and office need to be added in the middle of our neighborhood? I think there are a number of answers to that. One is that obviously we've done market studies and seen that there's still demand for additional space in the area. The second is that what we're trying to create here is a neighborhood center in many ways, and central location is appropriate for that. I think the third thing would be that we're adding a lot more residents to the neighborhood as well, and so those residents will create additional demand. What is your response to 40-foot homes on track day in relation to the homes on 45th Street, which are all one-story homes and are subject to SF2 max heights of 32 feet? The response is, I think that the city of Austin has some very clear compatibility standards. We have substantially expanded on those compatibility standards, providing double the required setback. And I think as this points out, those homes are entitled to up to 32 feet. So for a use that's being set back 50 feet from those homes to be entitled to an additional 8 feet of height seems, I think, entirely reasonable. Miller Development does not have 3-story buildings within 50 feet of existing single-family neighborhoods. Why do you feel that it is appropriate to place your 3-story buildings 35 to 50 feet from our homes? We've seen the Miller comparison to this project a lot. In many ways, it's a good and appropriate comparison and a good way to look at this. In other ways, it is a stretched comparison. Miller is about 10 times the size of this project, and because of that, and because of the subsidized land that they receive from the city, we're able to do a lot of things around the project that aren't necessarily economically viable in every case. If you look at virtually every other infill development in Austin, you won't find that condition really repeated besides Miller. As stated before, we are increasing compatibility standards by 40%, 100%, various amounts on different edges. So we are going above and beyond the minimum compatibility requirements set forth by the city of Austin. But I don't think we're able to accommodate a 100-foot setback or more. In June 2015, your plan included 225,000 square feet of office, 115,000 square feet of retail, now 150. Office space has not been reduced, retail has been increased. Total office is larger than 38th and Lamar building. So the 115,000 square feet of retail in June, I don't know where that number came from. It's not an accurate reflection of any plan we've ever presented to the community. The plan we presented in July did have 225,000 square feet of office in it. We made that commitment to the neighborhood prior to that July plan to reduce office from 350 to 225,000 square feet. We still feel like we should get credit for all the concessions made over time since the beginning of this process. So office space has been reduced. Retail has not been increased, but it has not been reduced at this point. And yes, total office is a little bit larger than the 38th and Lamar building. That site, I'm not sure the size of that site. It's a couple acres. It on a per acre basis, the office is dramatically smaller at the Grove. Your comparison of existing office and retail may well be comparable. The difference is that the existing single family is primarily on the edge. The existing square footage is primarily on the edge of single family housing, not in the middle, and are served by major arterials. What is your response? My response is twofold. One of my primary goals with that exercise was to give you a sense of the scale of the retail we're proposing. I'm not saying that what we're proposing is the same as what exists around Kirby Lane and Jefferson. It is obviously different in a lot of ways. But in terms of the amount of retail that's proposed, it's about 35,000 square feet more than what exists right there. And I would also add that very little of that retail and none of that office has direct access to 35th Street. All of it is accessed off of 38th, Jefferson, and Kirby Lane. This is very similar to the condition our site will have with Bull Creek Road, providing access very quickly to 45th Street. Would you want to live in or near a development with 15,000 square feet of bar space? Yes. 5+ bars, which can stay open until midnight to 2 a.m. and generate 3 times the noise of restaurants at the very hours that children, working people, and elderly people need to sleep. Yeah, I actually almost put an offer in on a house very near the site recently. I would love to live near the site personally, but I think the question really is centered on the appropriate amount of bar space in the site. I think the reason that the cap is set at 15,000 square feet is because there are some uses that sort of skirt the line between restaurant and bar, and some bar and grill type uses that end up having 51% of their sales from alcohol become defined as bars. And so this is primarily to provide some flexibility with some of the restaurant space, especially a restaurant overlooking the park. You might want to sit there and have maybe 3 margaritas while your kid's on the playground instead of 2. That's probably a little too much, but that's the intention of that. The intention is not to create a bar district here, and I think I think we, I don't want to speak for Garrett, but
he's fairly answered the question. No, our intention is to have sufficient flexibility to meet market demand without overwhelming the project with bars.
The next question, project design guidelines. Will the guidelines be updated to match the new residential development commitment? I assume this is referencing the new commitment across from Oakmont Heights. Is the person who asked this question present? So we made some additional commitments for the duplex housing across from Oakmont Heights. Those commitments have not been added to the design guidelines at this time. I think we're still finalizing those discussions with Oakmont Heights as far as figuring out how that commitment will play out. But obviously the intent is for the commitment to be memorialized in the zoning for the project. Where's the parking for 22,000 trips per day? I think hopefully we've addressed the 22,000 trips per day at this point, that's not really an accurate number. And then I think we already addressed the parking as well.
Yeah, and I would just say it's, 22,000 trips, not individual vehicles. Each, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Each individual, like a single-family home is assumed to generate 10 trips over a day, and obviously each home doesn't have 10 cars. So one car can enter and exit the site as many times as it wants to. So to get to that 19,000 number, that's not 19,000 cars that need to have parking on the site. It's 19,000 trips could be generated by 3 or 4 thousand actual cars. So
Facilitate sessions. Yeah. Is this development in line with Imagine Austin? The city's Imagine Austin staff reviewed this development very early and has been supportive of this development essentially from the beginning of the process. They made a determination early in the process that this development was in line with Imagine Austin. How can you in good conscience build a regional development in the middle of a residential area served by a 2-lane residential roadway, 4 and 2-lane residential roadway? Just kind of reiterate some points from the presentation. We don't believe that it is a regional scale development, and it is on a segment of Bull Creek Road that's essentially a commercial segment already with Post and Westminster uses there, and that roadway would be expanded to accommodate the traffic that is anticipated from the project. Milestone is focused on improving traffic, great, by adding more lanes. How are you addressing noise pollution from the increase in traffic? The traffic that comes with the development, I think is not increased noise from traffic. There's nothing actually proposed to address noise pollution from traffic as part of the project. Will there be noise restriction on the barge? Per city code. Was pleased to see grocery with surface parking in front. Were you able to get a commitment from a grocer that accepts this arrangement? There is a small amount of surface parking in front of the grocery. I think this says with no surface parking in front. There is a small amount of surface parking proposed in front of the grocery, a single lane of basically something that would be functionally a slip road in front of the grocery to provide a small amount of convenience, teaser parking. We believe that will be a pretty key ingredient in attracting a user for that space. Are the buildings the same height as the Domain retail office? I don't know the height of every building at the Domain.
There are many buildings in there that are taller.
Yeah, many of the buildings in the Domain are in the same height range. Some are taller. Ed, did you have a?
I do have a question about building height. I missed the Domain comment though. Your new street drawings in the mixed-use area tonight, which were very handsome, showed buildings, as I saw them, like the one to the right, or the one that's on the screen, as a 5-story building. Is that the new highest building level height for the whole project?
5 stories has always been the cap from the beginning of this process that we've imposed on the project.
I thought we had some 7s. Maybe I'm stuck in the Austin Oaks where they're still fighting about building heights, and I think we're still fighting about building heights too, because these were going to be taller than Post and taller than Westminster.
We had an allowance to go up to 75 feet in height and still have on up to 5% of the commercial core, but the restriction is still 5 stories. So the primary purpose of that extension is to provide architectural interest, at certain points within the building, rather than to build a 6-story building. We have placed a cap on the entire project of 5 floors.
What about the 6 stories of parking?
6-story parking garages are permitted because 6 stories of parking can typically fit behind a 5-story building and be completely shielded. If the study area already has a lot of office, why do we need more office in the Grove? I think there's a market demand for that. It also is, as I mentioned, it's a very good tool for making the structured parking more viable. You can have some shared parking between the office and the retail, which have different peak use times. It also helps make the retail more viable during the daytime hours. I think the office around it will also be a great resource for the retail restaurant uses at the Grove, as far as providing lunch spots and providing users for those restaurants. In many ways, I think there's some potential that some of that traffic from those offices that's leaving the area right now to go find restaurants elsewhere will actually end up being captured, and their trips being substantially shortened, or even taken to pedestrian trips for things like lunch because of the presence of the Grove. Why did you get rid of the alleyway behind 45th homes when that could help eliminate traffic conflicts on busy 45th? I think the decision to get rid of that alley was primarily intended to provide the greenbelt connection there. We had lots of requests for a greenbelt in that location, both from city staff and from the neighborhoods. And that greenbelt will serve a much larger constituency of people. The alley was something that we never really had full buy-in on, I don't believe, in terms of the demand for that.
Right, we offered the alley, and there was sort of competing interests among the 45th Street homeowners as to whether they wanted an alley or a green belt or both, which I think they would have preferred. And ultimately, when we looked at the public benefits to the broader community, the green belt was more beneficial.
Okay. How many stories, including above-ground garage levels, are the tallest structures? Just answered that. What are the dark blue and light blue boxes, and how tall will they be? The dark blue and light blue boxes, there's a combination of things that we kind of walk through in the residential section, but there are a couple of sizes of townhomes represented there. There's also some live-work units represented there. They are generally 2 or 3 stories. Too. Sure.
Yeah, let me just say a little more on the 45th Street alley versus Greenbelt. So I sat through, I think, 5 or 6 meetings with only the people that live on 45th Street, and went through and tried to get their buy-in and their commitment on exactly what they wanted over that I don't know, call it 3 to 5 long meeting process, and spent extensive time, effort, and energy working to try and understand exactly what they wanted in an effort to deliver as much as we could to them of what they wanted, which is how we've conceived the project from the beginning, thinking that if we go through the effort of understanding what people want and then work towards delivering as much of that as we possibly can, that we would be able to get the buy-in from the broader community. And that's our hope, and we continue to have that hope. But I want to make it clear that we put extensive effort and energy into understanding what people want in an effort to try and bring that to fruition in the project. And that's exactly what we did in the case of the 45th Street Greenbelt alleyway buffer area. Okay, so let me move on to the next set of questions. Why don't you go ahead for a couple more.
I've got 4 more here I'll grab real quick. Given the plan for pedestrian access to from the Grove and surrounding residential neighborhoods, how will the Grove prevent retail customers from parking in those neighborhoods and walking in out of the Grove? The answer is by providing adequate parking. No one will choose to park outside the Grove if there are available spaces within the Grove. It will be much more convenient to park close to the destination. Those paths are intended to provide opportunity for residents in those neighborhoods to walk into and out of the Grove. Is the overview of the site looking south proportional? The view really visually minimizes the developed area. Is it your intent to mislead? The view is proportional. It is based on an accurate 3-dimensional model of the site. And no, it is not my intent to mislead. It is my intent in selecting that view to show you how large the signature park will be. to show you that the mixed-use district will be in scale and proportional to Post and Westminster across the street, and to show you that the majority of the site will be residential and park. Traffic lights along Bull Creek, I guess that's a question of how many will there be. There's one, the existing one at 45th. We're adding one at Jackson Avenue. Number of stories for different types of structures. That's 4 to 5 for the mixed-use structures, 2 to 3 for the residential structures. Offices, duplexes, Westminster. Is the person who wrote this card here? I don't know what the rest of that is. Oh, maybe it's asking what is the height of those things. Offices 4 to 5 stories, duplexes 2 to 3 stories. Westminster will be the addition, the congregate care facility will be 5 stories. Environmental, what is the total amount of impervious cover in your development? Our entitlement, our proposed zoning would allow for up to 65% total impervious cover in the development. There are a lot of other things that impact total impervious cover, like parkland dedication requirements, or street sections, which require a lot of tree planting areas, preservation of existing trees, et cetera. In the end, my anticipation is that our impervious cover will be somewhere between 55 and 60%.
Okay, this is the final stack. You are the committed few. All right. How will large construction vehicles be brought into the site and construction materials and equipment staged, adding security to provide for the adjoining neighborhoods? We've contemplated putting in fences early to add some security for the immediately adjacent houses. It'll be brought in through the primary access points that we're contemplating. So it's going to be brought in from OPAC, and it's going to drive down Bull Creek and on 45th, as with most of the traffic that'll be coming to the site. Among the things I'm concerned about, and I don't think there's a question here, increased flooding along Shoal Creek, south of the Grove, and absence of sidewalks in the surrounding neighborhoods, especially along Bull Creek. So on the surrounding neighborhoods comments, we spent a significant amount of resources on a multimodal study for the neighborhood, and we've also agreed to seed fund some improvements in the neighborhood that will help address some of the challenges that were identified in the multimodal study. The multimodal study basically prioritizes the improvements that need to be made in the surrounding neighborhood to make them more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. Increased flooding on Shoal Creek, south of the Grove. We have spent a significant amount of time, effort, energy, and resources on the engineering associated with the Shoal Creek, and with our site and our site's impact on Shoal Creek. The summary of all of that is that we actually make the situation slightly better along Shoal Creek. And if the person here that asked that question has questions or concerns, we have a fair amount of material that's out there. There's a pretty extensive drainage study that we've done that's publicly available. We'd be happy to provide that. All of it is highly technical engineering information. What guarantees can the Grove provide to Idlewild residents who suffer from flooding from the Grove? Early on in our discussions with the Idlewild folks, we talked about and studied what the issues were. And so there's 2 types of drainage issues that Idlewild suffers from. One of them is subterranean, underground, and the other one that they're concerned about is surface drainage. And so on the surface drainage side of things, it's our job and it's Brian's job to make sure that our water ends up in our pond. And we will do that, and that's our responsibility. And if we don't do that, we'll be subject to liability for not doing it. On the subterranean water, that's a little different, and it's different because it's incredibly hard to understand. We've drilled probably 10 or 15 plus holes in the ground to try and understand where the subterranean drainage is coming from, the amount of it, and how it flows. And we've hired a hydrogeologist to go study that part of things to try and understand what's going on there. And the net result of that, and the bottom line on that side of things, is that it's very difficult to understand subterranean drainage. And so we've made a commitment that we believe will help alleviate their subterranean drainage, but we can't make any guarantee that they're not going to experience the subterranean water flow that they're experiencing now. So one of the commitments that we made is to run our utility trenches in parallel to their property line. And in doing so, we will likely pick up the water that's currently flowing under the ground to their homes. And if we do, it'll end up in our utility trench, and then it'll basically drain down into our pond. We'll have to get the water out of the trench if there's nowhere for it to go on a subterranean basis that kind of curves around their homes. So we've made some commitments there to try and help them with their situation and with their problem. But it's a challenging issue that we can't make any guarantees on. Adjacent neighbors have no petition rights, yet this density will degrade their quality of life and property values. How will you compensate them for that? So I fundamentally disagree with this comment and believe that our project will both improve their quality of life because they will have an active mixed-use community that they can go enjoy in any variety of settings, from jogging and bicycling to enjoying the restaurants and the other facilities within the project. And as for the impact on their property values, it's going to have a tremendous impact on their property values, and they're going to go up dramatically. And I think that any realtor or anyone that operates in the real estate business would confidently tell you the same thing about property values near the project. Milestone has agreed to the minimum level of green building for a PUD. Why not agree to a superior level of green building? So we've made a commitment to a level of green building in the PUD. We have the flexibility to exceed that if we so choose and believe that it's appropriate for the uses. Green building costs are high. We are committed to substantial amounts of green infrastructure in the project that helps make the entire project much more beneficial from a sort of a overall green perspective. We have real innovative water quality and biofiltration techniques that we're using throughout the project. We're going to be taking the condensate water and we're going to be putting it in the pond to use it as a makeup water source for the pond. And there's a list of other green benefits that Robert could tell you all about. But I'm working against the clock a little bit at this point because our lease on the facility runs out at 9 o'clock. Imagine Austin. Is the scale of this project considered a regional center or neighborhood center? Please explain. So Imagine Austin is a comprehensive plan that the city of Austin has, and Imagine Austin calls for density nodes throughout Austin, and it calls for basically density all throughout kind of the urban core. And there's other members on our team that can probably speak to this as well or better than I can. From the very get-go of our project, the city has broadly acknowledged that it conforms to and embodies the Imagine Austin plan. And that has been unequivocal from the start. And we agree. And I think when you objectively look at what our project does and what it brings to Austin, the innovation that it brings to Austin, it's precisely what's contemplated in the Imagine Austin plan. So we definitely think that it conforms to Imagine Austin and embodies what the Imagine Austin comprehensive plan calls for. What specific concessions has Milestone made as a result of negotiations with the BCRC? So I think to properly understand and contextualize that question, you got to understand the timeline and the history of our project, and really even the project before that. So the BCRC was formed several years before we purchased the project, and it was formed in response to a proposal that was made that they didn't like. And it was a proposal for a suburban-style grocery store and some more suburban-style type uses. I think there was a movie theater and some apartments in there. And so the BCRC really didn't want to see that happen, and so they came up, they opposed that, and they effectively opposed that, and then they came up with a set of design guidelines that they wanted to see implemented on the site. And those design guidelines call for what we've delivered. And they call for a great, innovative, high-quality, mixed-use project. And so if you look at the continuum of potential options that are out there for what can be delivered, you've got, a single-family residential subdivision on this side of things, and you've got, I don't know, I guess the suburban style thing that the BCRC really didn't like. And right dead center in the middle of that is the mixed-use development that we've agreed to go pursue, and to pursue a legacy quality mixed-use project on this site. And candidly, we're really good at home building and real estate development, and can execute that very well. And so that was an option that we looked at, and was an honest option that, if you look at what the city of Austin determined was the highest and best use of the piece of land when they were evaluating it, that's the highest economic value, is to go build a single family project on the site. And we've managed to formulate a way to bring the mixed use project that everyone wanted to see from the outset to fruition. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Is it at exactly the density that everyone wants and everyone can agree upon? It's not. But it embodies, it's the 90% or 95% solution that embodies what they wanted before the process started. And so we definitely would respond to that we've made great concessions. We made them at the outset. And then on top of that, we've provided you with a list of concessions tonight that we've made above and beyond that, which include some additional parkland, which include reductions in density, which include reductions in the office space. And a lot of that is in response to the dialogue that's been taking place with the BCRC and the broader neighborhood. That's a redundant question on the concessions. When will we be meeting with the BCRC again? I believe it's April 10th. April 10th. How many builders will be involved in the residential portion of the project? We don't know yet, and we are in the process of working to a greater level of detail on the residential side of things. What we do know is we're committed to a diversity of housing product types, and beyond that, architectural types. And so we have, I think this week, sent out a request for proposals or request for information from architects. We're sending it to 3,000 architects across the state and across the country. And so if you know of a great architect that you want to see involved with the project, please direct them our way. It's really easy for them to respond to the request, is all they have to do is send us information about them. We're going to hit their websites, we're going to check out what they're doing in terms of the designs, and our goal is to compile a diverse, creative, innovative set of architects that can help us execute on the construction of the residential portion of the project. All right, it's the last two, guys. I may be the happiest person in the room about that. When and why did you decide to have minimum parkland versus superior parkland? That's a great question, and I really appreciate it being asked, because I fundamentally and categorically disagree with the position that's implied with the question. We exceed the parkland on a per acre basis that's required for the site. I believe it's 1.5 additional acres at this point that we're exceeding it by. We're providing all of the improvements that are going to be required to make the park an unbelievable place to go and experience. And on top of that, we're committing to maintain that park. And our intention is to own the commercial portions of the project for the long term. And so we're going to be shouldering a significant burden associated with the maintenance of that park for a long period of time. And our intention in doing that is to execute it at a level that the city can't get to, that the city has exhibited an inability to get to across all of the parks that exist in Austin. And so our goal is to go in and kill it, knock it out of the park on the parkland, so to speak, and bring that to fruition as part of the broader vision that we have for the project overall. What is the expected timeline for the project? Start date and end date? That's a good question to end on. So the expected timeline is in part up to the people sitting in this room. We need your support, and we need you to get energized and get out and support the project with emails and letters. And on top of that, when the environmental board hearings start coming up, and when the zoning and plating hearing starts coming up, and when finally, when we get to city council and the city council meeting, we need your voices to be heard at that meeting, telling those commissions and those boards that this is the kind of project that you want to see in Austin, Texas. Thank you.